This is the first video of the build of the excavator. So I've got to a point now where I'm going to start assembling the dipper arm and this main pivot area. So it's just a kind of a quick walk around the inside before I put it together. So starting at the very end, I've made a switch mount to house the limit switches. So these two limit switches control or switch off the motor, this little N20 motor. It will switch it off once it comes to the end of its travel rather than keep trying to drive through. This little item here is what I call a camshaft. And that is driven by the two Ackerman arms on the bucket linkage itself. What happens is that will sit into that recess like that, and as the bucket is rotated it comes round and contacts the limit switch. So that's its travel. Coming back to the main sort of pivot point, this is quite a complex joint really. It's 2 or 3 different components where I've got 2 limit switches here. So I've mounted them up, and that will actually operate for the motor that operates the dipper arm. And I've got another camshaft here which I call the main centre pivot pin, and that actually sits through there and engages into the dipper arm there, so it drives it around. So as the arm moves in and out, this cam will turn. Once it gets to the end of its travel, it contacts this switch, opens circuit, shuts off the motor. I've put a couple of diodes in on the switches, on each of the switches as well. With the switches set in the default position, the ram is in the midway position. The motor direction is determined by the polarity at the source. Plus voltage on the left hand side turns the motor clockwise in this example, and the ground or the 0 volts negative on the right hand side. Plus voltage on the right hand side turns the motor left or anti-clockwise, 0 volts or negative line on the left hand side. If we turn the motor clockwise until it reaches its limit or the end of its travel, the limit switch switches across to the diode. This creates an open circuit for the motor and shuts the motor off. As positive voltage can't pass through the diode, it is effectively blocking the circuit. If the polarity is reversed, it is allowed to pass through the diode, turning the motor anti-clockwise, and the return line is able to pass back through the switch. When the motor is reversed out away from its stop, the limit switch resorts back to the default position, allowing the motor to be operated in either direction. The same effect will take place when the motor reaches its lower limit. The limit switch will be activated. The diode on this switch will effectively block the flow, and the circuit is broken, stopping the motor. As before, if the polarity is changed or reversed, the motor is reversed out of the stop, away from the stop, and the limit switch returns to its default position. So that is the function of the limit switches. So just a final shot now of the ram in action. So the bucket ram, just bench testing it, make sure it's functioning. Okay, bye for now.